Mr. President, we've heard some terrible stories about severe weather and damage that it's causing across the United States. My heart just goes out to the people of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and all of the communities in the South that were ravaged by tornadoes of record force and velocity. In the Midwest, our problems are more subtle, but also devastating in terms of the impact of floodwaters. It's nothing new in our part of the world. We have the confluence of the Illinois and Ohio rivers at the southern tip of our state, further north the confluence of the Mississippi and Ohio rivers at the southern tip of our state, further north on the Mississippi, the Illinois River, the Missouri River. And whenever there's heavy rainfall in one area or more, it ends up raising the levels of those rivers to perilous heights, which can inundate communities. I can't tell you how proud I am of the people who come forward in the midst of this type of challenge every single year. It just seems like, thank goodness, there's never a lack of volunteers. People are willing to step up. You start with our National Guard. They always do the best job possible, and I thank them over and over again for what they do. Then the local law enforcement that just works overtime, the firefighters, the police, and all the rest. Extra work that's going on in hospitals and clinics, and nurses and doctors working overtime. In my part of the world, too, state and federal employees have really pitched in at every level, starting with the Army Corps of Engineers, the Department of Natural Resources of the state of Illinois, the Illinois Emergency Management Agency, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. It's an amazing outpouring of support. Last Friday, I boarded a plane in Chicago, flew down to Marion, Illinois, and took a helicopter into Cairo. Cairo, of course, is the southern tip of our state. As I mentioned earlier, the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. And I saw there some things going on in the town of Cairo, Illinois, which were truly frightening and disturbing. This is a town which, in its heyday, was one of the major port cities in Middle America. Cairo, as the Ohio and Mississippi came together and then coursed on down to the Gulf of Mexico, was a major city with major economic activity. Over the years, as river traffic changed and the economy changed, Cairo changed too. Now has a population of a little less than 3,000 people. Many of them are very poor. They have an African-American mayor, Mayor Childs. I believe he is the first, if not the second, African-American mayor. They've had issues of racial strife over the last 50 years. They struggle to keep businesses in place. Their schools are always challenged. And now on top of that comes a flood. If you went along the Ohio River leading up to Cairo, you'll see an amazing levee. It's the kind of wall of protection, concrete wall of protection, which every river community would love to have. On the Mississippi side, not so much. But the interesting thing that I found when I went down there is even that side of the river, Ohio River, with this huge concrete levee, has serious problems. It turns out the water table is so high in Cairo, Illinois, that the pressure of the rising Ohio River is forcing the water into what's known as sand boils. So out of nowhere, in the midst of a lot or street, up pops a geyser of river water. You think, what's going on here? It's, 10, 15, 20, 50 feet away from the levee. Well, that's because the entire ground is so saturated and the river is working its way underneath, eating up the underlayment. I walked along there with a National Guardsman who was taking pictures of the scene. We went to one street that had been closed with two major openings where water was bubbling. And as the National Guardsman was taking my photograph, the street collapsed under him and he fell 2 or 3 feet down because all of this water had eaten out all of the substrata under this street. That's why this has become so serious that the mayor, Mayor Childs, started with a voluntary evacuation and then last Saturday night said, let's everybody leave this town. We don't know what's going to happen next. And that is the reality, not only of Cairo, but of several other communities. The 2,800 people of Cairo, Illinois were evacuated Saturday when the Ohio River reached its highest level since 1937. It rose above the 15.5-foot level this weekend, and it's expected to go higher. 5 other Illinois communities are now under a voluntary evacuation order. Old Shawneetown, Junction, Brookport and Golconda are being asked to clear out for their own safety. The biggest threat of major damage is still at Cairo. I was in Cairo just a few days ago, and I can tell you the water levels there were continuing to rise. This is a picture of a home in Cairo, Illinois. The water level is already so high, the home is uninhabitable. I saw many homes like this, but I also saw some superhuman efforts, which are hard to even describe, where people decided, even with a home that close to the river, they were going to build a wall of sandbags around their home and save it. It sounds impossible, but they're doing it. And the sandbags are up to 5 feet high, holding back the water, which, if it weren't there, would have inundated the home. The pumps are pumping water out from the home into the surrounding areas, and people are up night and day, 24 hours a day, in rowboats going back and forth, trying to preserve the one thing on earth that means so much to them, their home. That's the kind of battle that's taking place in homes all around Alexander County and Cairo. The sustained high water level has put an unprecedented amount of pressure on the levee, as I mentioned earlier. These giant sand boils are forming, and they're working all night to try to contain them. Local volunteers and guardsmen are doing all they can, but the Ohio River is expected to stay at or above flood stage for the foreseeable future, and the levee may not withstand that pressure. If Cairo's levee burst, the Army Corps estimates the town would be inundated with as much as 15 feet of water. The entire state of Illinois is operating under a state of emergency. 320 National Guardsmen are on hand to help evacuate people and monitor the water levels. The state has issued and helped fill more than 1 million sandbags, working with the Guard, the Army Corps of Engineers, and local responders to put in generators and supplies where they're needed. My thoughts are with the people and families affected by the floodwaters in southern Illinois, especially those who've had to leave their homes. I'm grateful for all the people, the military and civilian alike, who are working around the clock to control the Ohio River.